Fantastic. Thanks everyone for coming to this session. My name is Dr. Alex Phelan. I'm from Monash University, and today I'll be chairing this session on listening posts, identifying and responding to online extremist signaling. We have a great lineup. Firstly, we'll be hearing from Astrid Bastians from Maastricht University, who will be talking about the Taylor Swift concert plot, a case study on how online and offline leaking signals can indicate planned attacks with latent IT. I'm very excited to hear all about that. So just as a refresher for everyone in the room, we will be taking questions at the end of both presentations. Astrid, you have 25 minutes. I'll let you know when you have 5 and 2 minutes left, okay? Perfect, all yours.
Perfect, thank you. Wow, I didn't know I had quite so much time. Let's get these slides running first. So we have the PowerPoint here. Are these visible to you now?
They are indeed, yes. We just need them
Perfect.
probably in presenter mode. Perfect.
Okay, perfect. Thanks so much. I am on my other screen right now. Maybe I'm gonna drag myself right here. Yeah, that's better. So I don't look into this weird left corner. So hi, so nice to be joining you today. I am Astrid Bastians. I'm a PhD researcher at Maastricht University in the Netherlands. As you can see, it is quite late right now, so I'm incredibly grateful to be presenting remotely at this wonderful conference. And today I will talk about the Taylor Swift concert plot. This is a case that has caught my attention last summer, but it might be less familiar to you. It is about a planned attack on the Taylor Swift concert in Austria that was luckily intercepted and prevented. Due to a large amount of public information on the case, we have now been able to use it as a case study and score it on the threat assessment instrument LATRAN-IT. So this is an instrument that uses leaking signals to detect planned attacks, and it has performed quite well at that in the first validation studies. So after discussing this case, I will go on to explaining the instrument and its first validation studies. As I'm sure you can all appreciate, I'm unfortunately not able to disclose the specific items of the instrument publicly, but we can have a look at the final scoring of the case on the instrument, and specifically at the online and offline leaking signals that he sent out. And finally, I will end the presentation with some conclusions on the usefulness of an adaptability of LATRAN-IT to a threat landscape that is moving increasingly online. So the main suspect in the Vienna Taylor Swift plot is BA. And BA was arrested on the morning of 7th of August 2024, one day before the first Taylor Swift concert in Vienna was to take place. And foreign intelligence services intercepted his alleged plans to attack the mass of fans outside of the stadium during the second concert on the 9th of August. So as you can see here, at many concerts, thousands of Swifties who didn't get a ticket gathered in front of the stadium to still watch and listen to the concert in that way. So this certainly forms a very accessible and vulnerable group of people for committing attacks. But it has to be said that the capabilities of VA to inflict serious casualties is quite uncertain. His motivation and intentions were very serious, though, as he did try to purchase machine guns and a grenade in the weeks before the concerts. But due to a lack of money, he moved to the option of constructing a self-made TATP bomb, which can be extremely destructive. However, he wasn't really effective at constructing that either. And the amount of TATP found was so small that it would have hardly done any damage. Other elements of his plan seemed to be driving a car into the mass of people in front of the stadium by using a blue light and a police siren, and to attack people with knives and a machete. During questioning, VA said himself that his plans to obtain weapons failed and that he would improvise. So any combination of these three elements would probably constitute his final attack, with the worst option being that he would drive the car into the crowd and then use a combination of the bomb and the knives to attack victims in the vicinity. So, who is our suspect? BA. BA grew up in a small town southern of Vienna, the capital of Austria, to parents with a mixture of North Macedonian and Albanian roots. He was 19 at the time of the planned attack. He grew up Muslim and seemed to have developed more misogynistic and conservative views in his later school years. According to his own account, he was quite lonely and suffered from depressive feelings a few times throughout his life. There also might have been substance abuse of medications and of cannabis. As a young adult, BA started an apprenticeship as a retail salesman at a local steelworks factory. So this is a bit of his general background. But the plan to do something violent in the name of Islam had actually been around for some months before the summer of 2024. So in March 2024, he already traveled to Dubai with the intention to stab a soldier in front of a mosque and shoot bystanders with the soldier's gun. But at the last moment, he became afraid of the police bullets that would be subjected to him, and the suffering that would cause for him. So he decided to not go through with the attack and return to Vienna. The attack was simultaneously coordinated with an attack in Mecca that actually also happened, and an attack in Istanbul, where it's not really clear actually whether the accomplice succeeded. So BA returned to Austria and seemingly picked up his life again, but the desire to commit a terrorist attack appears to have returned in summer. On July 7th, BA uploaded a loyalty oath to ISIS on a social media platform. On 18th of July, he quit his job, telling his co-workers that big plans were on the way. He then reportedly isolated in the house where he lived with his parents and his sister while they went on a holiday. In the following weeks, he mostly spent his time online and chatted with like-minded people. He corresponded with several people about his plans. He tried to acquire weapons and advice from a number of different persons, but ultimately largely failed at that. So foreign intelligence agencies alerted the Austrian security services about 10 to 7 days before the concerts took place of the intercepted signals. The Austrian intelligence and police services then started to survey BA themselves and intercepted similar messages, but also observed him handling the TATP at his home, wearing protective gear like a face mask and gloves. Based on that, the police luckily interfered and arrested BA along with 3 other people who might have been implicated in the plot or at least had some knowledge of it. And then in the first police interviews, BA confessed, but he apparently later retracted this confession. So I'm really intrigued how the case will develop. So this is the case that we're going to work with during this presentation, and now I'll tell you a bit more about the instrument Latran IT, as it's fairly new and I can imagine unfamiliar to most of you. So Latran IT is an instrument to detect Islamist terrorist attack planners. So it was designed with a specific threat assessment context in mind. It was developed bottom-up through the analysis of case files of 48 people who did commit or plan an attack, and 52 people who were suspected of that but were innocent. So Latran IT aims to help security organizations when they have surveyed a suspect and collected a certain amount of information to make a standardized and evidence-based decision on whether or not some type of intervention might be necessary in a case. And to do that, it has 16 items, of which some are weighed 2 or 3 times, so the total maximum score is 20. 14 of these items are specifically aimed at leaking signals, And two are more broad warning signals or signs. And leaking is not to be confused with leakage, which might be a bit more of a familiar term because of its usage in the Trap 18. So leakage is when you tell someone directly that you're planning an attack, either through threats or disclosing your plans, while leaking is more comprehensive because it also includes other observable warning signals that indicate an attack is being planned, such as purchasing weapons or making fake threats on social media. And these leaking signals were found to be present in 96% of attackers in the first validation study. So they seem to be quite a universal phenomenon. But of course, they also occur in people who are not planning an attack. So Letrand IT was developed to investigate which characteristics of leaking signals would be indicative of attack planning. After the development of the tool, the researchers also scored their sample on it. So on average, the perpetrators had a score of 9.69 on the instrument, while the control group had an average of 2.25. Most of the leakings were online communication in this first sample, and 60% of the perpetrators shared something about the attack that they were planning. So that's quite remarkable. And most started to show the leaking signals about a year before the attack occurred or was foiled, but some also 5 years before. So based on the scores in this initial sample, the possible scores were divided into 5 different categories, and all but 4, so 92% of the perpetrators had a score of at least moderate. And 3 of these 4 with a lower score were actually part of a group where the other group members did show extensive leaking. So overall, the instrument would have detected almost all Islamist attacks that occurred in Germany in the past decades. All right, so let's have a quick look at the validation studies then. I don't want to bore you too much with the stats here, as I'm sure not everyone loves statistics as much as I do. But there's been 2 really interesting studies that have looked at the predictive validity. And the way that we assess predictive validity with this type of instrument is by looking at what the instrument predicted would happen in a case and compare that to what actually happened. So we plot this accuracy into an ROC curve, and the accuracy measure that we get is the area under the curve. And it's good to know that an AUC is considered fair when it reaches 0.7, and most traditional risk assessment methods in forensic psychology would fall within the 0.7 to 0.8 range. So the first validation study used the same sample as the one that the instrument was constructed with, and the researchers found an area under the curve of 0.91 in this study, so that is really incredibly high. And if you make the cutoff for assuming that this was a case from the offender group at high risk, then we get a sensitivity of 90%, which means that if we assume that someone with a high risk or higher is planning a terrorist attack, we would be correct in 90% of cases. So that's great. The specificity, that's a difficult word at 1 o'clock, is then 85%, which means that 85% of the cases that are innocent are also assessed to be innocent by the instrument. So these are really promising results, but of course they're based on the cases with which the instrument was also developed. So in a second validation study, the results were very similar, even though it was a much smaller sample size and the coders were new to the instrument. They found an area under the curve of 0.852. And then again, with the cutoff at high risk, the sensitivity was 0.89 and the specificity was 0.75. So these are slightly lower, but they remain really quite promising results. So what would the instrument predict in the case of BA, based on his online and his offline leaking signals? The final score, when considering both types of signals, is quite clear. BA would score 12 points and therefore fall in the very high risk category. But especially interesting would be to see whether the suspect would have been detected if threat assessors had only access to online or only to offline signals, for example. And since online signals can be very numerous and their level of urgency is often quite unclear, it is interesting to investigate whether the instrument is sufficiently sensitive to that. So when we look at only online signals, we can see that 11 items remain met. VA had made and posted selfies with his knives, where he imitated another Austrian attacker, as you could see a few slides ago. He had also posted a video with an oath of alliance to ISIS, and he regularly posted videos and texts with a violent message. Analyses from other academics seem to indicate that he was introduced to this content on TikTok, and that he posted such content himself on Instagram and Telegram. More direct signals of the attack planning are that he had tried to acquire weapons via Telegram, and that he shared some information about his planned attacks in these messages. So concretely, he had tried to buy a grenade and machine guns from an American vendor end of July, but he was unable to pay the required price. He also asked around for advice on the construction of a TATP bomb, and he was offered the gas sarin by someone he believed to be an ISIS official. And next to the weapon correspondence, BA had also tried to convince someone else to commit a coordinated attack, just as a plan in Dubai. So his online leaking contained both indirect and direct signals. It was repeated, and it had a long time span of a few weeks or even a few months. When we look only at the offline leaking signals, we reach a score of 10 on the instrument. So similarly, BA did not hide the fact that he was making a bomb very well, which is a clear direct signal. There were also some indirect signals, like watching violent videos during his shift at work, and with his parents present. And he resigned from his job with the ominous words that big plans were on the way. Again, the leaking signals are varied in nature, repeated, and span an extended time span. So I think we can see from the description of the case that the online signals were overall more numerous and more alarming. Both the more vague signals of sharing violent videos and messages occurred more frequently, as well as the more clear signals of trying to procure weapons. Offline, there were less signals altogether, and there was only one clear attack planning signal, namely the attempt to construct a bomb. So this case seems to be a great example of hybridity, both in its attack planning and in the broader warning signals. The case seems to suggest that even when radicalization and sharing radical IDs and planning an attack occur mostly online, we can often still see behavioral changes and planning behaviors in the real world too. Both online and offline, BA falls in the very high risk category. If you compare this to the proposed cutoffs from the previous slide, he falls way above that. His scores are even higher than the average of 9.69 in the offender group of the study sample, even if we only look at the offline or only at the online signals. So this case indicates that the combination of both online and offline signals probably remains the best detection method of attack planning. But if there are only online or only offline signals detected, Lettering it might remain sufficiently capable to detect attack plans. So, in conclusion, the application of this case study forms a first international validation of Lettering it, so that's great. It also shows that threat assessment instruments might remain valid, even if attack planning moves mainly online. But of course, this case study has many limitations due to its small sample size, namely one, and the absence of control cases, and therefore it does have limited generalizability. Accordingly, we would like to continue this research line and conduct additional validation studies with Lettering it. For example, its comparison to other instruments that are used for the threat assessment of terrorist attacks, and its application to larger samples and in other countries. So I hope this has been an interesting case study. Please don't hesitate to contact me via any of these ways, and I look forward to any comments and questions that I receive.
Thank you, Astrid. That was wonderful. A round of applause for Astrid. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're conscious it's very early for you, so thank you for a wonderful presentation. I'm sure there will be some questions. We just have one more presentation first before we get to those, if that's okay. So next we have presenting from us Richard Frank from Simon Fraser University and Arian Rathi from the University of Texas. They'll be presenting on talking their way to extremism using LLMs to analyze the speech of violent and non-violent users of Stormfront. The
Good
question is,
morning.
yes, fantastic. Thank you.
So I have shared my screen. Hopefully you can see it.
We can see it. Thank you so much for that, Richard.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to present. I wish I would be present in real life. Unfortunately, I'm not. I'm doing this remotely and talking about the online footprint of violent extremists. So joining me is Arian. So we will be both presenting this talk. I'm happy to discuss. Like everyone has a digital footprint online, including violent extremists. I have two up on the screen. Brenton Tarrant went off and killed 51 in Christchurch a couple of years ago, and as part of this, live streamed his attacks online, as well as announced his intentions and produced a manifesto online. So he has a pretty large digital footprint. Peyton also killed 10 individuals. It was a racially motivated attack in Buffalo, New York, and live streamed parts of his attack on Twitch and posted a manifesto on 4chan. Sorry, it was just interrupted by a message saying something about a live stream by TASM. Okay, so like every other internet user, violent extremists and terrorists will leave a digital footprint. Many researchers have raised the question about whether such individuals who have gone off and commit violence can be identified online before they actually engage in violence offline. But this is looking retrospectively. We know an individual has committed an attack. Could we have done something to differentiate them, to identify them before they have actually gone off and done this attack? However, research has overwhelmingly focused on identifying and examining extremists online, not those who adhere to extremist beliefs, but are violent in physical space. It's one thing to find extremists in a Facebook group, for example. It's another thing to find violent extremists in a community of extremists. So that is where research is lacking. Empirically, very little is known about online terrorism and extremism research about the relationship between posting behaviors and membership in an extremist group. There have been efforts, research publications, but still it's quite a few empirical research has looked at the online posting behaviors of users who then go off and commit violence offline. And even fewer within that have identified the differences in online posting behaviors of users who have gone off and killed and those that have not, but they essentially both belong to the same community. And that's what we try to find. We try to find differences in the online behavioral patterns of violent and non-violent right-wing extremist users within the largest white supremacy web forum, Stormfront. It's an open access forum, which is the largest right-wing extremist community online. With some help, we were able to identify several users in the community who have gone off and committed violence. So our research questions have become, can we use large language models to differentiate between posts of violent users, people who have gone off and committed violence, and non-violent users, users who are essentially keyboard warriors. They have extreme beliefs, but have not actually gone off and committed public offline violence. And is there a detectable difference between the posting patterns of these groups? Can we predict, based on these patterns, whether someone is trending to become violent offline? So we captured Stormfront using the dark crawler. This has been in development since 2010, and we are able to grab the entire discussion forum. So we have the entire Stormfront offline in our database. We detect the data capture using a series of VPNs so that the location where this data collection is coming from is not known. If we get blocked, for example, we can switch to a different exit point and resume data collection. So using this method, we captured Stormfront. It took a couple months of effort. Once it's done, it's in our system. We have multiple different discussion forums, and it essentially tries to recreate the discussion forum in its entirety. So looking at the subforums of Stormfront, we have the equivalent within our system. Clicking into one, we can see the threads in the forum. We recreate that within our own system, and the posts themselves are structured very, very similarly to the original format. And in this fashion, we're looking to capture the forum in its entirety using the same structure, the same authors, the same everything, so that we have the ability to analyze it afterwards. This was then extracted into an Excel spreadsheet, and based on discussions with a former member of Stormfront and a former member of the community, some of the users of Stormfront were labeled as violent because they were actually, they have gone off and committed violent acts. And some other users were labeled as non-violent because they were known to not have gone off and committed any violence. So we ended up with a spreadsheet like this. Some of these people are labeled as violent. Sorry, these are not people, these are posts. We would have, for example, all of these posts here belong to the same person, but all of these posts are then in an Excel spreadsheet. We would feed the text of what they said into an LLM and produce some numbers, which we'll talk about in a sec. Once those numbers are scored, or once these posts are scored, we would roll them up to the author level and create author level statistics. So for each user here, what is their means, their standard deviation based on all of these factors. Yeah, the next couple of slides, we'll talk about what those factors are.
For this part of the process, this is exactly the prompt we gave the GPT model. We basically told it to act like an expert in criminology and computer linguistics. Its job was to look at each post and give us like 4 scores: radicalization, emotion, conspiracy, and ideology. The range were different. For example, the radicalization scores goes from -50 to 50, as it was the most important one, while the other scores went from 0 to 5. The model also had to explain why it gave the score and tell us how confident it was in the answers. And we used Python to write this code, and we used the exact GPT model of 4.0 mini. The reason was simple. It was cheaper and way faster than the bigger models, which mattered because we were running this nonstop for more than 70 hours. In total, we processed 381,000 lines of text, used over 186 million tokens. But what is a token? A token is basically the currency OpenAI uses. Every piece of text, a word, a part of word, or even a punctuation counts as a token. Different model charges different prices per million token. So the longer the text and the more complex the model, the more it costs. But the whole thing costed us about $112. For this scale, that was actually pretty efficient. And now you might be wondering like what the model actually returns. This is one of the actual text. The post here talks about things like gun control and concentration camps. We fed that into the 4.0 mini model using the prompt from earlier. At the bottom, you can see the actual scores it returns and the reasoning behind those scores and the confidence level that what we and that's what we repeated in every single post. And you can see like how the ideology score is there, the conspiracy score, and how the radicalization score is 25, and it's pretty confident with a 85%. And once every post was scored, we had to assign it back to the user who wrote it. Because when we fed it to the model, it only got the text and not the user who made the post. So when we attached it to the user, we tried to create a graph. This graph shows two users as an example. One is a violent user and one is a non-violent user. Each line shows the average score per month for that users. So the red line shows the radicalization score of average of each month, and the other lines show the other three scores. You can see that the violent user scores rises over time across all four categories, while the non-violent users trend is going down. But this pattern wasn't true for everyone. Some violent users only increased by little or even went down in all their scores. But some of the non-violent users were going up in their radicalization and other scores. Uh, and this is a decision tree. After scoring all the posts, we wanted to see if there were any features that could clearly separate violent posts from the non-violent ones. This is based on a post level and not a user level. So we fed actual text of the post to make this decision tree. So we used a decision tree. The idea is simple. At the top is the most important splitting factor, and the left means true and the right means false. The model ended up being 99% accurate at separating violent and non-violent posts. The biggest factor was actually the month the user joined. Most violent users joined in December, and then as we dwell deeper into the tree, you can get more specific rules on how the decision tree was actually made. And this is a slideshow that the confusion matrix for both the decision tree and the random forest. They're pretty confusing in themselves, but first, what is the difference between like a decision tree and a random forest? If the decision tree is like one doctor saying yes and no and giving you a diagnosis, the random forest is like a team of specialized giving you a group diagnosis, which would need a lot more information than a single user or a post. So that's why we used it for like when we had like a lot of text, which was 318,000. That's why the random forest performs even like a slightly better in this than the decision tree. And here's what it means. So the field 00 is the non-violent prediction correctly. The 01 is non-violent predicted as violent, which is not correct. In the 11, it's violent. 10 is violent predicted as non-violent, and 11 is violent predicted correctly. This same ideas apply for every confusion matrix you will see in this presentation. And yeah, next we went to user level. This decision tree is built on the user level, not the post level like the last one. We had around 99 users who were violent and non-violent. So the random forest doesn't do as well here than it did previously. We used each user's mean, median, trends, and other statistics of the scores we had GPT labeled to make this decision tree. The best distinguished feature turned out to be the standard deviation of ideology, basically how much the ideology score jumped or fluctuate with respect to the entire population of those 99 users. On this model, our total accuracy was about 70%, performing better on the violent users and slightly worse on the non-violent users. And this is another confusion matrix for the user level decision tree, which you just saw in the previous slide. As expected, the random forest performs slightly worse here because the test data set is very tiny because of the 99 users and not the 318,000 texts we had. And the violent users were way more accurate in here. And this is the final analysis which we did. This is also on the user level, but instead of averages, standard deviation, we actually uses the slope, intercept, and R square of the scores we captured and how their post behavior changed over time. Here, the top feature switched to emotion, even though ideology was the strongest one before. That shows that the different calculation can highlight different features. Even with the new setup, the total accuracy didn't change much and stayed at the 70% mark. But this time it was better at the prediction of non-violent users rather than the violent one. You can also see a small graph on the left side showing the slope of all scores of one of the users. And then finally, the confusion matrix here shows the same pattern we saw earlier. Random forest again struggled because we only had a few data points to work with. But this time, the precision of the non-violent users was better than the violent ones.
So to interpret these findings, we started off with the assumption that we would be able to find differences in the patterns of users posting, that in some statistic, maybe the ideology score or something, over time, the violent users would have an increase in their score. And we can, when compared to the non-violent, which we expected would be flat or perhaps decreasing, we would be able to find differences in the posting behaviors of violent users versus non-violent users. This is all in an extremist community, so we know their ideology is the same, but we still expected over time violent users to post more and more radically violent or ideological content. Although this turned out to be yes, we can find the differences between violent and non-violent users. They were not as accurately detectable as we would have liked. We got accuracies of about 67 to 75%, which still is better than a 50-50, but not as accurate as, again, we would have liked. Instead, what we found was that the differences are quite detectable when we look at the radicalization score, the emotion score, conspiracy, and ideology score of the posts directly, individually. It could be that with the number of users, we have 99 users, the data set was too small, as opposed to the raw posts where we had 281,000 posts. And maybe the model was able to learn much better based off of this data set and produce much better accuracies. And in this case, we got a surprisingly good 99% accuracy, which we've confirmed, we've investigated for human errors, like us creating something wrong, and that's why we're getting 99% accuracy. But so far, we haven't been able to find anything that points to a mistake. The post-level decision tree had the first split point as month of join date, which indicated that the violent users were much more likely to have joined in the month of December. And we're not quite sure how to interpret this. So interpretation of the decision trees is still ongoing. We're still digging into why some of these unexpected features are coming up when we're looking at the decision trees. There are other split points, such as most violent users joined before 2002, which could indicate that they were early users of the forum and they had time to build up their radical viewpoints, and they helped shape the forum. So maybe that history is a part of their life story, and that is also a part of why they went off and committed violence. We're still working on the analysis, and we would like to look at other aspects of the users' activity in the forums, such as which subforums they posted in. Maybe that helps indicate which users will go off and commit violence as opposed to not. There are some limitations to our study. The data does not include anything but what we can find in the forum. So like employment status, criminal records, history of mental illness, radicalized peers. These things are not part of the models that we built. We built our models exclusively on the online fingerprint within the Stormfront forum. In this case, we used only one large language model, which could have introduced some bias. It doesn't matter which direction, but it could have been suboptimal for this scenario. So maybe it was not ideal for radical language. So one of the limitations is the use of only a single LLM, and we definitely need to explore other LLMs, which could perhaps give better results.
Richard, sorry, just to let you know, you've got 5 minutes left.
Yeah, I'll take 2 more. Thank you.
No worries.
The users in this case were labeled with insider knowledge. So someone intricately familiar with the users of Stormfront helped label the users. And this might not be available in other contexts or forums. So repeating this same exercise in another forum might not be as easy. But maybe open source knowledge will help. In an incel community, there have been several notable killers who then became idols. We might be able to go back and find them without any insider knowledge. So having that insider knowledge might also be a limitation in recreating this. To conclude, though, we wanted to look at the online posting behavior of people who have gone off to commit violence and people who have not gone off to commit violence in an online extremist forums. This is slightly different than finding an extremist in a non-extremist community, because here everyone has the same ideology and believes the same thing, maybe to a different extent. But even that might not be an indication of whether they want to go off and kill people. I think we found very promising results here, and we're still working on the interpretation. We do want to look at other types of LLMs, and maybe they will get better scores. In the future, we do want to look at pinpointing the exact moments in time when an individual engages in violence, and then look at their posting history maybe long before what they say, and then immediately before what they say. Maybe they're just immediately before, a couple of days before they go off and do this, they start posting really violent behavior or posting manifestos or something, and that is the indication. And we have not done this here. So I think that would be a very valuable future work. Also, we want to look at the whole forum, not just our little sample, but apply a model that we built, for example, the post model that we built here, and apply them to the entire forum to see how it behaves, because when looking at the entire forum, the data set becomes wildly unbalanced with many, many non-violent users as opposed to violent users. That is it. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to discuss.
Thank you, Richard and Arian. That was fantastic. We'll give you a round of applause. Awesome. Thank you. Is Astrid still here in the Zoom?
For sure.
Yes, there she is. Fantastic. She hasn't fallen asleep. Great. Great presentations. We're going to open up for question and answers, and I'm hoping there's lots of questions because I'm a qual scholar, so most of this went straight over my head. Do we have any questions? Thanks, Momo. Perfect. And if you could just introduce yourself for the panel, that would be amazing too.
Cool. Hi, my name's, well, everyone calls me Momo. My name is Mohammed. I work at Vic Uni. My question's for Astrid. Thank you so much for your presentation. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. So I was just wondering if you, by any chance, did a bit of a qualitative deep dive looking into the false positives and false negatives that you got in your predictive validity study, and whether you learn anything that might improve the tool, or whether that says anything about, say, the process in which the tool gets used in and the professionals that use them in terms of their workflow. Yeah, thanks.
It's a really great question. I really like that, and I'm wondering now myself as well. Yeah, I wasn't involved in the development of the tool. So this was two wonderful researchers in Berlin, Rebecca Bondu and Laura Tampe, who have developed the tool. And yeah, I'm sure that they have looked at this, and I will definitely, when I am doing my validation studies. The problem is only, I think, when you when you do this type of research, you have to promise that you won't publish anything or tell anything that is about one case, but only about the group as a whole, right? So yeah, I'm sure that they're not able to share this outside of their group that has done the research. But yeah, it's a really good idea, and I definitely will look at it. And maybe it is also possible to say something about like the group of false positives or the group of false negatives. So I'm definitely gonna look into that when I do my real validation studies. Yeah, I'm gonna ask this question to the developers. I like this question. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Astrid. That's wonderful. Other questions? Perfect.
Hi there, my name's Nick. I work in the Department of Defence. Question is for Richard and Arian. I'm curious about the contextual kind of analysis you guys might have done. I'm thinking about things like the interaction and engagement that posts have got, whether things were reinforced, things like patterns in frequency of posting, and then also things like local time of the poster at when things were posted, and then also the outliers on that.
Okay, thank you. To answer, some of the things that you mentioned were part of the analysis, like total number of posts was definitely a part of the analysis. I don't think this forum tracks likes or anything similar. We could look at the number of responses. So that could be a feature that's incorporated into it. So a person posts and gets 100 responses. That could easily be a part of the model that's built. But otherwise, no, we wanted to evaluate the strength of an LLM and give it essentially just the text of the model, or sorry, of the poster, and see how well we do. The next step is to actually incorporate more of the context and try to increase the amount of features that we have to build a model on.
Thanks, Richard. We have another great question over here. Actually, we've got a few questions for the panel. We'll start here and then we'll head over this way. Otherwise, I'll hand over my mic because it might be easier.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Hey, Richard, the question is to you. My name is Safta here. I'm from Victoria University of Wellington, New Zealand. Just want to ask, did you define, or did the LLM define the conspiracy scores or the ideology scores? Yeah, I mean, did you define them before processing, or did the LLM define that itself? Thank you.
Arian?
Yeah, I can take that one. So we gave it like references for like each score. So as you saw on the prompt there, we had 0 to 5. So every like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 had like a little prompt, like an example. And we let the LLM interpret it for itself rather than just giving it a hard definition. And that's how the analysis was done.
Thanks, Arian. Was there a question yet? Andrew? Sorry. Thank you.
Hi, my question is for Astrid. There was a brilliant presentation on brilliant research. The AUC scores that the Lateran it got are incredibly high. I'm not saying that in a way to cast doubt on the research. I'm interested in the comparison with TRAP-18, where TRAP-18 is the most publicly validated of all the threat assessment tools, and its AUC scores don't get that high. Would I be correct that the indicators in the Lateran it are all focused, if you can say, if you can't say, are all focused on attack planning and don't resemble the distal indicators that TRAP-18 has, and that maybe because TRAP-18 has a greater focus on the propensity for attacking rather than just attack planning, could help explain that rather huge difference between the AUC scores.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think it's a great question. I also agree that the AUC, especially in the first study, is extremely high. I think that can be partly explained also because that sample was also the sample that was used for creating the instrument. So there's a little bit of circular reasoning going on there. But in the second, that's why the second validation study is so important, even though the sample is small, and there the AUC is 0.85, which I think is quite similar to AUCs that the Buckler study, for example, has found. So in Germany, a researcher has also applied the TRAP-18 to a set of cases and found, or was it? Okay, I'm going. It's too tired for this. But there was a study that also, I think it was Buckler, that separated the distal and the proximal factors and computed area under the curves for both. And I think if you look at the proximal factors, then you get an area under the curve that is quite similar to 0.85, so around that. So I think, yeah, Lateran it definitely, or leaking in general, is more similar to the proximal factors, and it doesn't really include the distal factors that the TRAP-18 has, because it's more focused on this like late stage do we intervene or not, and not necessarily what goes on before that. So yeah, I think the reason lays in that. Yeah, exactly.
Excellent, thank you.
Thanks, Astrid. Another question? Perfect.
Thanks. Hello, Heme Fong from Victoria's Department of Justice. I had a question for Richard and Ariane around, in terms of validating how the LLM scored and analyzed those posts, was that compared against, say, a human expert scoring, or I'm interested in how you did that validation process. Thanks.
In this instance, we had 381,000 scores to review. I did spot check a few. They seemed reasonable, and that was the only validation that we could get. My hope for next steps is to use multiple models, try to incorporate and expand on the number of scores, the number of models, and ideally use those to cross-validate each other. But in terms of human review of the scores assigned by the LLM, aside from some spot checks, we didn't have a chance to do this on a larger scale.
Thank you, Richard. Other questions? We have quite a bit of time. No. Okay. Well, I am conscious of how late it is for you, Astrid, specifically, and Richard and Aaron, it would definitely be getting there. So we would just like to thank you again for your wonderful presentations. We'll give you a round of applause again. Thank you. Amazing. Now I do have a couple of things as the session closes just to mention to everyone. We have finished up a little bit early today. Lunch will be starting from 12:30, so this might be a good time just to go to the bathroom, get a coffee or whatever. After lunch, which will take place between 12:30 and 1:30, there are 2 roundtables. So the first roundtable will be on building digital community resilience, youth-led solutions for safer online communities. And the second roundtable will be on online misogyny and violent extremism, insights from Catalyst. If you're participating in these forums, please arrive a little bit early so we can make a start on time. And the sessions start promptly at listed times. That's what they told me to read out to you all. Sorry. But thank you again, everyone. This has been wonderful, and have a great break. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Thanks online.